Good morning, Algebra 2. We are jumping into lesson 62 using complex numbers. So first let's start with what the heck a complex number is. So review, we cannot up until now take the square root of negative numbers. So they came up with the complex number I. And I represents the square root of a negative number, but specifically -1. So the square root of -4 would equal the negative is I, and the square root of 4 is 2. So I get 2I. So the negative comes out and becomes I, and the square root of 4 is 2. The square root of -3, the negative represents I, but I don't know the square root of 3. So you can write it like this, I root 3 or root 3I. Either way. But this is how we simplify square roots of negative numbers. Now, moving on, I squared equals, well, that would equal 2 i's, right? I times I. And I know I equals the square root of -1. So I replaced the square root of -1, right, for I times I. Well, the square root of -1 times the square root of -1 is just -1. So that is something we need to keep in mind. I squared equals -1. So here is the value of I. Here's the value of I squared. Now let's go over a complex number. Must be written in the form A plus BI. So notice A is the real and BI is your imaginary. So it's called a complex number because you have two parts, the real number and the imaginary number. So we're going to jump into lesson practice. They're going to have us practice simplifying, solving, adding and subtracting, and then solving again. So this is all on page 444, and we'll jump in with part A and B, which is on simplifying. So part A asks us to simplify 1/2 times the square root of -100. Now notice I said times because the 1/2 and the square root are next to each other. So I'm going to simplify this to be 1/2 times the square root of the negative, right, is I, and the square root of the 100 is 10. So I have 1/2, right, this is where the negative is the I, the square root of 100 equals 10. So that's where I'm getting 10I. So 1/2 times 10I would then leave me with 5I. Part B, 3 times the square root of -450. So I'm going to simplify this. I have 3. I'm going to take the I out times 450 is 225 times 2. And the reason I'm using 225 is 225 has a perfect square root. So that leaves me with 3I times 15 times the square root of 2. So I'm going to write my final answer as 45 root 2I or 45I root 2. You can kind of choose where you would like to put the I. Usually letters are last, so I'm going to write it like this. I'm going to put the I a little closer. Actually, that looks kind of funny. Just make sure that it doesn't look like it's in the radical. So you can choose how you write the answer. All right, the next couple pieces are on solving. So part C in our book says 0 equals x squared plus 196. Now notice I don't have just x. I have x squared plus 196. So to solve this, I'm simply going to subtract 196 from both sides. And so I get negative 196 equals x squared. Now to solve for x squared, I need to take the square root of both sides, and I'm going to write the results here. So x equals, I need plus or minus. This happens anytime when we solve with square roots because two possible solutions. And the reason is when you square a positive number and you square a negative number, you get a positive answer. And so, like, for example, a negative 4 times a negative 4 is positive 16, and a positive 4 times a positive 4 is positive 16. So positive 16 has two possible square roots. So I start there, then I'm going to simplify 196. The square root of 196 is 14, and then because that is negative, I have the letter I. Okay, that negative creates the I. So I have two possible solutions. You could write it like this, 14I, comma, negative 14I. Okay, it's up to you. Part D, they'd like us to solve negative 6x squared equals 216. I'm going to bring that down. So the first thing I'm going to do here is divide both sides by negative 6. And I got x squared equals negative 36. Now to get rid of a square root, squared, I have to take the square root, which leaves me with x equals, you have to have that plus or minus because there's two possible solutions. The square root of 36 is 6, but the negative creates the I. So my answers are 6i, comma, negative 6i, or you can write it together, x equals plus or minus 6i. Now let's move on to adding and subtracting complex numbers. It's very simple, so don't be scared. So part E, I have two complex numbers. Negative 2 plus I is one complex number. That's why there's parentheses, because you have the real and the imaginary, plus the other complex number. And we're simply going to combine like terms. Okay, so I'm going to combine the real parts first. So negative 2 plus 14, right? Negative 2 plus 14, that gives me 12. And then I'm going to combine my i's. So I have positive I and positive 4i. So that'd be I plus 4i would give me a positive 5i. And so that is my answer. And it's written in proper order because I have the real part and then I have the imaginary. Make sure your I looks like an I, you guys. Don't be sloppy. Otherwise it's going to look like a 1 and it's going to look like 12 plus 51. Part F. So my first complex number is 10 minus 6i minus negative 4 plus 3i. Now the first thing I'm going to do here, I'm subtracting. And so that negative affects both the negative 4 and the so it makes a positive 4 and a negative 3i. Now I'm going to combine like terms, right? So that would be 10 plus 4 minus 6i minus 3i, which would give me 14 minus 9i. Okay, moving on. The last couple are more solving. So part G says to solve x plus 9 squared equals -9. Now, what would be easiest here, to distribute x plus 9 or to solve it the way it is? Now, this is in almost the complete the square form. And so leave it with the squared because I can just quickly take the square root. So if I do that, I'm left with x plus 9 equals plus or minus, anytime you take the square root of both sides, 3i. And then from here, to get x by itself, I would subtract 9. So x equals, write the real part first. So -9, sorry, there's a glare. Then the imaginary, plus or minus 3i. So you write real part first. Okay, and that is my answer. Or you could write it separately, x equals -9 plus 3i, or -9 minus 3i. Okay, next one. Solve x squared minus 2x plus 2. Now, the easiest method here to solve this one would be to complete the square. Okay, because I can't factor this. So I am going to complete the square. And I don't have the lesson that's from memorized. I don't know the lesson number by heart, but I do know how to do it. So I'm going to subtract the c term. So x squared minus 2x, leave a space, equals -2. I'm going to complete the square by taking the b term divided by 2 and squaring it. So the middle term is -2. -2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. And so that is what I'm adding to each side. Now I can factor this side. I have a 1 and a -2, so my factors are -1 and -1. So x minus 1 squared equals -1. And then from here, what we've been doing before, take the square root of both sides. I'm left with x minus 1 equals plus or minus. The square root of 1 is 1. The square root of the negative is I. Last, I'll add 1 to both sides. So x equals, write the real part first, so positive 1. And then the imaginary, plus or minus 1i. Okay, and that completes this section for homework 62. Skip numbers 11, 22 through 24, 28, and 30. Thank you.